this is my presentation. My name is Shayna Kleinberg, and for this project, I have chosen the sixth stage of Erikson's psychosocial developmental theory. So I just want to give a breakdown. So in Erikson's theory, each stage, there's 8 stages. So each stage has a crisis, and each crisis has a resolution. So a crisis plus a resolution, in Erikson's eyes, equals the cultivation of a specific life quality or virtue. So Erikson believes that each stage throughout life build upon each other to create a life of meaning, substance, and value. So here is a breakdown of all of the stages. And the stage I'm going to be focusing on is stage 6, intimacy versus isolation, which the crisis of this stage is building relationships that lead to the virtue of love. So in stage 6, it's called intimacy versus isolation. The crisis is creating impactful relationships that positively affect one's life. So the idea is that during this time, people are focusing on building meaningful relationships that will last throughout their lives. And in doing so, you avoid living alone and possibly developing mental problems associated with loneliness, such as depression, anxiety, and so on. So the resolution of stage 6 would be finding love or developing lasting relationships. And this stage usually occurs in the early 20s and can last up until the 40s. And this is during a time when people are seeking to form intimate, loving relationships and build their lives. So in order to resolve stage 6, one must have first resolved the crisis in stage 5. So, which is developing a strong sense of personal identity. As I said in the earlier slides, each stage of Erikson's theory builds upon the next. So he believed that in order to find love, you had to have a strong sense of identity. And having a strong sense of identity allows you to have lasting relationships. So success during stage 6 leads to enduring, secure, lasting, committed, and strong relationships throughout life. So the idea is that when we know ourselves and we have self-respect and boundaries, then we can attract the right partner, we can have successful relationships, and we can have positive ideas of what love is and what positive relationships look like. So Erikson placed huge importance on the impact love had on development, claiming positive relationships contributed to health and well-being. So Erikson really believed that positive relationships had a really strong effect on the overall positive outcome of your life. So developing strong relationships made you less likely to experience loneliness later in life. However influential positive relationships are in development, so too are negative relationships. So some of what I found in my research and doing the annotated bibliography. I wanted to really touch on the opposite of what Erikson's talking about here, like what happens to you developmentally when you don't have positive relationships, because I think so often in life people don't have positive relationships, and it's also important to focus on what happens to you developmentally when you don't achieve these things. So part of what I found was that relationship breakups can create symptoms of depression within people who don't possess psychiatric disorders, which means it translates to the emotional effect of a relationship breakup is powerful enough to create depression symptoms in the brains of people who don't have depression, which just emphasizes the power of how negative relationships can affect emotional health. So again, we're highlighting how Erikson believed relationships helped one's overall quality of life. He deeply believed that, part of growing up, part of aging, part of developing mentally was developing emotionally, and in doing that was creating meaningful relationships with other people and people outside of yourself. And so his idea supports the notion that positive relationships are good for optimum health, which we have proof of in other research. So part of my studies found that positive relationships involve investing time, effort, and intimacy. So Erikson's talking about the value of positive relationships, but I wanted to seek deeper into almost like what defines a positive relationship. So part of what this research found was that investing time, effort, and intimacy was more likely to result in a healthy relationship, which positively affected one's well-being. So we're kind of seeing how things are going full circle. Again, stage 6 relies heavily on the success of the previous 5 stages. So the resolution of stage 5 is a strong sense of identity, and that segues into developing meaningful relationships. So the most important is cultivation of identity and a strong sense of self. Erikson believed a strong sense of self was important to build relationships. This is like foundational. So for my interviewee, Julie, I wanted to focus on stage 6 of her life, because this is when the most impactful relationship occurred in her life, and that was when she met her husband. So in this sense, we're talking about a romantic relationship. So some of the challenges that Julie faced in her personal life during this time was a lot of different things. First of all, her husband was a lot older than her. And he was going through a divorce at the time, so he was previously married. She is from a very strict, old school Italian immigrant family, who doesn't approve of marriage outside of the Italian culture. And because of her relationship, they didn't speak to her for a long time and were very upset that she was choosing somebody outside of the Italian community. After she moved out, her family refused to speak to her, and she had to confront her parents about her relationship. So instead of choosing between her relationship and her family, she sought acceptance from her family. Some more challenges. She helped her partner experience a tumultuous divorce from his previous marriage. His previous wife didn't want to sign the papers, which caused a lot of tension and conflict. And all the while, Julie was helping raise the daughter, her partner's child from the previous marriage, so her stepdaughter, despite all of the challenges and her being significantly younger, because there was a 14-year age gap between her and her partner. Just checking on time. Okay. So some of the accomplishments, her family eventually accepted her relationship. She became a second mother to her stepdaughter. They had a strong marriage and 2 children, and they were successfully married until he died from cancer. And additionally, Julie was able to become really good friends with his ex-wife, and they remain friends to this day. So it's kind of like a multifunctional family. So because of her success during stage 6, she was able to cultivate a lot of positive relationships out of this situation. So another psychosocial conflict during this stage, according to Erikson, was establishing solid relationships. In Julie's case, the impactful relationship was love, marriage, and romance. She was also facing conflicts of deciding to love outside of her culture, move out of her family house, marry a man who was 14 years older than her, going through divorce, and already with a child. So some education and gender factors. Julie was born to Italian immigrant parents who barely spoke English, so college was never really an option for her. Finding a way to change her life through marriage while also finding love was how Julie successfully resolved the crisis of stage 6 and ultimately changed her life. Being a woman during the 70s was difficult, and women didn't possess the same rights in work and home, so because college wasn't really an option, marriage was a perfectly viable option for women at this time.